Welcome to the Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2023. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interest Project. Our mission is to provide voters with the information they need to make informed decisions about government, candidates, and ballot measures. Our focus is local. We cover Island County, its cities and towns, and various special districts, as well as the representatives from the 10th Legislative District. The 2023 elections are local and nonpartisan. We are covering 44 elective offices on this year's ballot, including mayors, city councilors, school board directors, and commissioners for hospital, port, fire, parks, and cemetery districts. 67 candidates filed for these offices during filing week in May, and we've invited all of them to do interviews for you. We also have extension coverage of these elections and the actions of these government agencies on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with Andy Plumlee, a candidate for City Council Position 2 in Oak Harbor. This interview was recorded on June 24th, 2023. We provided a list of potential questions to the candidate in advance of the interview. Okay, so we're here with Andy Plumlee, who is running for City Council in position number 2 in Oak Harbor. Andy, welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Where are you today?
I am just outside of Oak Harbor right now. We're doing a ribbon cutting for a new self-storage unit here on the island. So,
oh, outstanding. Is that the U-Haul place just north of the city?
No, it's right off of North Gate Road, the roundabout going towards the back part of the gate or the Navy base.
Very good. Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll open with a few quick biographical questions. So let's start with, are you married or single?
I am married, and I have, between my spouse and I, we have 7 children.
7 children, that's a lot. That's a handful. Did you grow up here on Whidbey, or did you end up moving here?
We moved here about 9 years ago.
Okay. What brought you to Oak Harbor?
We just wanted a change from California. I was working with a cheese manufacturing plant down there, and my wife got an opportunity to work up here, so we made that change. I'm originally from Washington State, so it wasn't that much of a change.
Okay, where in Washington?
Aberdeen.
Aberdeen, been out there. Nice place. Very different from here.
It is.
More forestry kind of stuff going on, but very good. Did you go to college? Would you study, that kind of thing?
So I did go to college. I went to college down in San Francisco at a small school called Presidio. I studied sustainability and left school with a master's in business and a master's in public administration, both focused on sustainable development, sustainable management practices.
Interesting. That'll be an interesting background for a city councilman for sure. Did you serve in the armed forces?
I was in the Navy for 14 years. I was a chief petty officer in the Navy. I did operations. So I worked navigation, radar operations, communications. Towards the end of my time in the Navy, I was the officer in charge of a detachment out in Sasebo, Japan, where we drove landing crafts and took Marines and equipment to the beach. I also built war game scenarios in Coronado, California, and did mission support for the teams, SWIC, SEAL, and other operators that operated out of Coronado. So sat in a big room and tracked them on screens around the world.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. If we were doing a different kind of interview, I'd ask you more about that, because that sounds really cool. Last of these sort of introductory questions, what kind of community organizations are you involved with?
I am on the board of the local Chamber of Commerce. I am on the city's planning commission. I have had very limited, although I wish I've had more with Island County Parent to Parent. I was a house captain this year for Hearts and Hammers, North Whidbey Hearts and Hammers. So not a lot of day-to-day, but volunteer certainly every chance I get.
Okay, very good. So as a city councilman, one of the biggest tasks that you're going to face every year is reviewing the mayor's budget proposal and approving a budget. The biennial budget for 2023 to 24 is $250 million. What kind of experience do you have with budgeting, especially for governmental agencies?
So I have not done a budget of that size before, admittedly, but when I was the officer in charge out in Japan, I was responsible for my detachment's budget, which was about $5 million. It comprised 4 landing craft and a shore installation.
Okay.
So for about 2 years there, I was responsible for the annual budget, ensuring that we not only kept costs down, but that we properly supplied and outfitted our teams.
Very good. And there's also you're going to be one of 7 city councilors. It's a different kind of a job than mayor. Each of those city councilors has a strong personality and opinion about what the city should be doing. Can you tell us a little about the experience you might have with persuading people to your point of view in an organization like that?
Well, I spent 8 years of my time in the Navy in the Chiefs mess, and I don't know that you'll find much stronger personalities than Navy chiefs. And it certainly won't find a more diverse group than that. Um, and I think that trying to persuade people to my view will defeat the purpose of the job. So I'll approach those conversations, especially the difficult ones, with an intent to bring it back to the intended outcome. Because I think oftentimes people have a similar outcome in mind. It's the roadmap taken to get to that outcome that is where the disagreements happen.
Okay, fair enough. So then let's talk about outcomes. What do you want to accomplish while you're in office? Are there benchmarks that you would use to evaluate whether you've been successful or not?
I'd like to see families stop moving out of the area for lower cost housing and better jobs. I think if we can create a benchmark that shows that community members are opening businesses, those businesses are thriving, we're seeing more money pour into our local economy than pour out. If we can improve transparency between the city government and our community, I think that's another benchmark to track. What is the civic awareness and knowledge of our community compared to where it's at today?
That's an interesting question. How would you measure where we are now and where we would be 4 years from now?
Well, I think right now what we need to do is look at some methods that have shown success in other areas, such as participatory budgeting, ranked choice voting, and we need to benchmark kind of what the general climate is around our local governance today. That's through surveys, that's through town hall meetings. And then in 4 years, if we're able to establish some of those, see what the community's perception is then, and see based on those surveys where people's views are and where their trust is and where their knowledge of what's going on in their city is.
Is that a particular challenge for a city like Oak Harbor where there's a fairly substantial transient population connected to the base? Does that make that harder?
The transient population does provide unique challenges that other communities may not deal with, but it's certainly not specific to just Oak Harbor. I think it's something that happens in military communities around the country.
Right.
But I think that the surveys need to be targeted towards residents. They need to be targeted towards the residents that are so, and we could do that really easily through our monthly utility bills. It'd be a great way to send out surveys, and it'd be a great way to do participatory budgeting. So I think there is a way to remove the challenge around who's giving the information.
That you use that term participatory budgeting, and I don't think that I've heard that before. Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Well, participatory budgeting is a concept where certain things that the community or the local governance will fund is put out to the community for a vote. So there's different ways that you could do it. You, for example, could list 10 or 15 projects and say, here's $5 million of budget. What projects do you want funded? And then the community votes on that, and the top vote getters get funded. Or you could have projects that go out and you have the community vote on them. And if the community votes yes, if there's a significant amount of the community says, yes, we want to do that, then that initiative is funded and that project is done. And it gives the community an opportunity to take an active role in the shaping of their community and their own governance.
Interesting. I don't know that I've ever heard of a community doing something quite like that. Do you have examples of where that's been used?
I know there's some communities down in California that have done it. I know, I believe Oakland, if I remember correctly, about 8, 9 years ago, Oakland had an initiative where they did some of projects like that. I believe there was a, I don't want to, I don't want to say something that's incorrect here. I think it was a mural project, doing murals around the community, but it
Okay.
may have been a different type of art project.
Okay. Art project is an interesting topic because we've had so much discussion about this Angel de la Creatividad sculpture that's going in apparently now at Flintstone Park. Um,
Mhm.
is that the kind of thing you would have submitted to participatory budgeting, or how would you have dealt with that question if you'd been on the council?
I think that would have been a great use of participatory budgeting. I think that, I will say, I think that project showcased the challenges of having 7 individuals who are at varying degrees of interest and expertise on any given subject that might come before that council. Uh, the challenges that come with trying to represent 22,000 people. Um, I don't know the histories of our current city council members, but I don't believe any of them are renowned art experts. They were operating off of the best information they had from the Arts Commission, who are definitely passionate about art, and from the feedback they were getting from some members of the community. They didn't hear from all 22,000. There's a segment of the population that has no interest either way in the art. Um, and so we can see that these kind of decisions can be very difficult. It takes a great amount of trust on the expertise of the people that are advising you. Um, it's something that can be very divisive if it takes hold. And I think where participatory budgeting would have worked with this is putting that into the utility bill and asking to submit that. Yes or no, do you want this? Um, Another thing too, it showcased is as a community, we are very diverse. Some people want it, some people don't. It also showed that the value of having our commissions and boards in the community. And I think that those commissions and boards in many ways should be should have more subject matter experts on them if we can get them to come to the table. And they should have some more authority. I'd like to see as we move forward that our city council moves from purely approval to some veto power and let some of these boards and commissions that are the experts pass things like art placement and then give the council time to veto it as opposed to having to approve it. Because I think one of the challenges with the angel statue was the timeline. It just drug on and on and on. And a lot of other things that were very important to our community went by the wayside while we argued about this statue.
Right. That's certainly true. Um, what do you see as the biggest challenge the city faces right now?
I don't see one big challenge because I think the whole thing is a system. I think each challenge we face is in a different sector, right? So if we're talking about our economy, we need viable businesses. We need businesses that can pay a living wage. We need businesses that can operate, year round. If we're talking about housing, we need to identify ways to ensure that the community can purchase homes where they live. Uh, if we're talking about our political environment, then we need to discuss how we improve transparency and improve engagement and improve the trust between the community and our council. So I can't say that there's one big challenge, but I think all of these tie together to create a challenge that our community faces in how do we continue to govern ourselves so that we grow sustainably, effectively, and in a productive manner that allows those that are here to remain in our community.
Sure. You did an interview about 3 weeks ago with Political Lens, which touches, I think, it touched on, I think, several of the things you just mentioned. But and we've linked that interview on our website so that people can take a look at it. It's about 35 minutes long. In that interview, you talked about homelessness as just one, I think, entry into what you're just talking about, and the organizations that serve those people. And you made an interesting point, was that you think those those organizations, and stop me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but you think that those organizations use the wrong metrics to measure their success, having more beds or raising more money or something like that. What do you think is the right metric for organizations like that? And how, as a member of the city council, would you encourage them to try to apply those metrics?
Sure. Well, I think I'll say that the metrics that the organizations use are used to measure individual success, right? We got a blanket for everyone that comes in,
Right.
for example, 100% blankets. So if we have people without blankets, our focus is on getting more blankets so that we can hit that mark. The metrics I think we should be using would be geared more towards recidivism, right? How many people are repeatedly in our shelters? How many people are in our shelters for more than 30 days? How many people are in our shelters for 6 months? How many of people that are in our shelter simply move to another shelter? How many people in our shelters are receiving duplicate services from other organizations and making it look like we have a larger problem that needs more financial support than we may actually have? When I was in grad school, my final project was actually a spreadsheet that we called the Community Service Saturation rating. And what this was designed to do was to take all of the services, both government, non-government, volunteer, business, and create a database where the city and city leadership would be able to see the percentage of community that was either below the poverty threshold, and so they're receiving services, well above the wealth threshold, so they're paying for their own services, and the number of people in the middle that weren't getting anything because they made too much money,
right,
but not enough to support themselves, not enough to pay for themselves. One catastrophic event away from losing everything.
right.
And by taking that and pairing that, you could see that some people, for example, someone who may be collecting assistance, and we see this with government assistance, right? If you qualify for food stamps, you automatically qualify for many other programs. Some of those programs are redundant and they provide similar services. But when we look at those, we see that all of these services are at max capacity. And the reality is it may just be doubling and tripling services to a small group of people. So I want to see the metrics geared more towards getting individuals exactly the services they need, not more, and getting them the services that move them out of the homeless population.
Okay, that seems reasonable to me, but the thing that leaps to mind is the city of Oak Harbor the right level of government to address that problem, or is it more of a county or state issue?
So the city of Oak Harbor in and of itself is not the right level, right? And many of the laws that are being passed at the county and government and the state levels and even federal are hand tying the city to make decisions that are in the best interest of the community. When we look at, for example, the RVs off Hoffman Road, it's easy to say, well, we shouldn't take someone's home from them. But the reality is we have laws that say you have to be roadworthy or you're not on the road. Right. And we also have expectations from community members, and it's a rightful expectation that when they pay their taxes, when they buy their homes, when they send their kids to school, that the community reflects their norms and values. And so if we can't at the city level get to a point where we are comfortable saying that if a individual or group of individuals is not willing to do what is necessary to meet the minimum requirements in our community, those social norms, then we're okay with you not being part of the community until you're ready to assimilate. Since we can't do that at this level yet, the best thing that city council can do is continue to communicate with county commissioners, with state leadership, and be very emphatic that these things don't represent our community, and the laws that are being passed do not represent the best interest of those that we we lead and that we represent. And we want these laws to better represent the community, not a small group of individuals that may have. Now, I want to be very clear here. I'm not talking about short-term homelessness. Somebody loses their house, somebody loses their job, the primary breadwinner passes away. We know cash infusions into those to help stabilize somebody for a short-term situation is the right way to go. I am talking about chronic lifestyle homelessness. No matter what you do, the goal is I want to live in this manner, and I'm not interested in following your community's or society's norms and standards.
Interesting. That is a challenge, especially in this political environment. But part of what you were talking about has to tie into housing, and that's listed as one of the things that you're concerned about on your website. And you're on the Planning Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have there are two ways that we can expand the housing stock in Oak Harbor. We can build out, expand the urban growth area, build more in a broader area of the around the city, or we can build up higher density within the city, taller buildings, and that kind of thing. Do you have a preference on which direction we take?
From an urban standpoint, I would prefer that we build up. I think urban sprawl will move into our farms and our rural areas, and people live in rural areas because that's a lifestyle that they enjoy. And if they purchase that property, they have a right to enjoy it the way they want to enjoy it. I am a big fan of mixed use development, where I think that our corners and land that it should be built to have park-like settings with retail shops and apartments above. And that's for a specific group of people that want to live in that type of environment. That solves one challenge to housing. What I'll say is that we are an island.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, we're going to run out of space. And lack of supply increases demand. We know that. But we need, as a city council, we need to have a better conversation with our partners in the Navy, right? And having served in the Navy, I love being in a Navy town. But right now, I believe we're at like 44% of our community is military. They're now having to move off the island. So if we had to do an emergency recall, many of our service members on this island couldn't make it back in suitable time.
Right.
So we need to start having, one of the ways we can start addressing the housing is having these conversations with the detailers in Millington, having these conversations with the admirals in DC, and saying to them, look, this is what we as a community can support for troop strength. And we need you to be willing to help us ease some of this housing burden by updating and building more housing on your property, on the naval bases. We need you to seriously put some money behind updating this base because our community is behind this base.
Yes.
But we cannot do it if what we're having to do is displace the people that live and work in town in order to create housing for the squadrons that we're bringing in. We need your help doing this, and that's not something that city council can do without that help. So that's one way. Address the housing from that aspect. It's one spot. It's not going to solve everything. Another thing and why I'm big on business is because there's actually another way to improve housing affordability, and that's increase the earning power of the members in the community. We have a lot of service jobs, a lot of jobs that are in the retail sector. They're jobs that we know nationwide, they're fighting for higher pay. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to see us bring more of the trades back. I'd like to see more of our high school students move into the trades. I'd like to get away from the messaging that if you're in the trades, you're not going to make a living, because there is money to be made there. College is not the only route. We need to create more opportunities for high income potential for community members so that they have the resources to compete with off-island investors.
That I heard you say something very like that during your interview with Political Lens, and I'm wondering, what is the city's role in that? Because a lot of that sounds like something that needs to happen at the Oak Harbor School District or somewhere in the state educational bureaucracy. What's the city's piece?
I agree with you that that's where the decision's going to have to be made, but someone has to start the conversation, and city leadership can be the ones to start that conversation. city leader, the city does have an economic development coordinator now.
Mhm.
And I've sat in one of his presentations, and his ideas he has solutions. He has ideas on how to make our economy robust, and they're good ideas. And so we need to be promoting that. We need to be, as community leaders, going to these other leaders and saying, let's have a conversation. This is what the city needs. What support do you need from us so you can make the decisions that help us solve the challenges our citizens face?
Very good. That is something to think about. And we're kind of getting towards the end of our time. So a lot of interesting topics. We could go on for a long time, but I want to kind of bring this to a close. What is the best way for people for voters to learn about you and your campaign? Is it website or Facebook or somewhere else? What's your primary communication channel?
So I do have my Facebook page, Andy Plumlee. I do have a website, andyforcouncil.com.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm managing my whole campaign by myself, so the website is not always the most up to date. I'd say that's more for the broad overview kind of idea of who I am, and then my Facebook page is more of the specifics and much easier to see kind of day to day where I'm at. Also, my email, Andy@andyforcouncil.com is a great way to send me a message, and I'm happy to schedule phone calls. I'm happy to respond to emails. Yeah, and I'm out in town. I am a local business owner, so I'm available anytime someone wants to discuss city council or our community.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. I think this was really helpful. It'll give a lot of viewers a lot to think about.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the platform, and I appreciate you for sharing it with me.
You bet. All right. You have a good day.
You as well. Take care.
Come on. Well, thank you for watching our interview with Oak Harbor City Council candidate Andy Plumlee, who's running for position 2 on the City Council. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, available in 4 local editions: Camano Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. Subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterest.com/subscribe. And look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you and have a good day.